Wrong estimations mean that you're going to be either overcharging the customer or undercharging the customer. If you're trying to overcharge, you might lose the deal. If you're not, if the deal is not lost, later down the road, it will cause frustration for that company. If you're undercharging, then obviously that project is not going to be commercially, viable for you. Because of this friction between teams doing the estimation and teams doing the execution, there's this sense of not owning the estimates, and then there's a blame, etc. as well. Repeat these cycles over and over again. There's a lot of baggage. People, go through these experiences. It has an emotional toll.
अच्छा सुल्तान, मुझे एक बात बताएं
जी.
Software estimations. Why 80% of the software estimations are wrong?
Why they're wrong?
It's a $1 trillion industry when it comes to software services. And from last 40 years, why they couldn't figure it out how to give the estimates in a way कि जब actual में execution हो 80-90% उसके close जाए. But I mean, today software estimations look like that you need to structure something, you need to have a mental model, and actual में it has nothing to do with how you planned it, why it is the way it is.
I think when I think about software estimations and the question that you ask, clearly what we need to go back and see is what are we trying to estimate with software estimations. Essentially, it's the uncertainty, and we're trying to predict the future. But then the question is, how are we trying to do it? And when you go back and look at most of the case studies and mostly the prevalent practices, is essentially subjective estimations. It's humans who are trying to predict the future based on their intuitions, some semblance of data, their own biases, and how they look at uncertainty. Even if you look at waterfall or agile practices, we talk about story points and so on and so forth. But things change. There's so many other forces that come in. It's a dynamic organism. When you get into software development, things change. There are uncertainties, there are complexities. When you anchor software estimations, everything that now you're at the start of a project, everything that you're now trying to do is in relation to what was anchored. And nobody thinks of software estimation as a dynamic organism which has to change and adapt and move dynamically as the uncertainty and complexities around the whole thing changes, and as well as new information comes in. So what I'm trying to get to is that we need to develop a completely different perspective on estimations, and it should not be something that is just done right there and just cast in stone, and then we forget about it, and then we move forward without looking on how the landscape is changing. Now, that is a bit of a so it's interesting because when we look at services industries, for services industries, it has a completely different significance, because that's where it all starts. As compared to if you're trying to develop your own product and you can be, more reactive and so on and so forth. In which case, even agile approaches give you ability to react, not necessarily estimate better. But so when I come to service industry, that it's the way I like to think of it is that it's that commercial linchpin on which your relationship with your stakeholders, clients, customers is based on. So that's where it starts. That's what you're going to ask the customer.
You spoke about uncertainty. I have been part of those workshops and discoveries which went on for years, for 8 months, for 10 months, and where people try to manage and write everything that could go wrong and try to bring it into your documentation so they know and plan accordingly. But what happens कि उसके बाद भी 8 माह की डिस्कवरी वर्कशॉप्स के बाद भी uncertainty आ जाती थी. I mean, I just want to make a point here. So, for example, when SpaceX started, they started off as like, what the hell this cost plus contract thing is? Like, because these systems are so complex, you can't really come up with a cost over there. This is whatever the cost plus contract. So charge a margin on top of it. SpaceX came in and they said, no, that's wrong. There has to have a fixed cost of this thing. If this thing is possible for a system as complex as a rocket, why software is so hard? आज भी अगर companies like Accenture, well, they booked $2.6 billion or something in Gen AI. I mean, but they couldn't come up with a way कि ये software requirement capturing को कैसे करें. For example, whenever you want to work with these services businesses, they ask for discovery workshops that go for 6-8 months और आपको bill कर देते हैं. So why innovation cease to exist? क्यों? मतलब आपके rocket engineering तो की requirement तो निकली जा सकती है, but software की नहीं. Why is it so?
I think
Why is an uncertainty?
it's an interesting one. It's a two-part. So we can focus on how it's done. All of these examples where you go into these longer workshops and try and estimate this. The other thing is, where are we when it comes to now how the world has changed, where we're sitting at, and why I think that this is a problem ready to be solved. It's a matter of, just getting your head down and doing it. So I generally don't think it's a problem that can't be solved anymore where we're sitting now. But historically, what has happened, let's just talk a little about that. There are many factors in play. So if you're into a 6-month discovery workshop, right, there are cases, for example, I'll give you examples. So there are cases the team that is doing the discovery is not the team then developing it. So so there could be different team doing the discoveries, and then there could be different team actually building it. But essentially what you're doing is, in that case, is you're taking a gamble with the uncertainty by different set of people doing something and different set of people doing something, because there's no objective truth here. Unless we come up with a mechanism of defining that objective truth, then that's really what is happening is the team who done that 6 months of work, all of their biases, all of the things that they're going to, things that are going to change when that piece goes into execution is lost, is not accounted for. Requirements is one part of the whole equation. Okay, having an understanding. But when a team comes together, they, in a way, they come with all their expertise, and you got to benchmark those teams, etc. as well. That's what becomes that organism, which is going to deliver that piece of software or piece of code and so on and so forth, which could be significantly different from at the time when you build, you did that estimation, or you understood the requirements. There could be nuanced cultural things as well. And then I want to actually talk about what happens with this estimation, what the kind of impacts you see. Having not accurate estimations because of the complexities and because of the teams and people, and it's a human method, it's an expert method, right? Even with story pointing, a bunch of people sit here and they, try and come up with this test. And there's always this, we call it the positivity bias. I was in a meeting the other day with one of the, a CEO of a company, and he was telling me that they try and do these ground up estimations, forecasting basically. But what really ends up happening is that, at a granular level, whoever's there, the person who's supervising, when he asks them, the person down the hierarchy for estimations, they're very gung-ho about it. They're very optimistic about it. So the optimism bias goes all through the process. So people want to do it. People would say that we'll get it done. Hence, the estimates become unrealistic. There are also cases. The cases where people have a long-standing history and baggage of not being able to deliver projects, they would always overestimate the projects as well. And hence, especially for services industry, it becomes a big issue, because then you're not able to sell, because you would know that most of where you lose the deal is essentially commercials and, apart from all the other things. And that's where, overestimation is a big problem in software services industry, especially with, the way AI has come about. So you see all of these challenges coming into during the estimation process. Now, there are ways to solve this. And really where we're sitting on right now, I believe, is that machine learning and AI, I believe, can actually help us solve this problem. Because now we just don't have models, machine learning models, the traditional regressions or time series. We just ingest data. Now we have attention-based transformer models who can understand language as well. And when you combine the two, then you add all the context, all the complexity of what a project possibly could be, all the way from requirements to the sentiments of the teams, So I'm talking about retrospectives that you do, the status reports that are published, that, issues that you see across the historical projects that you delivered, documented maybe in a language, in a form of language, reports, requirements, so on and so forth. Even things like, these models can go and look and see that, front end to back end ratio, for example, of a particular project, integration challenges. I don't want to,
So before we go in fixing and I bring in the other elements, if I ask you, based on your experience, give me 3 major reasons why a software architect or project manager fails to estimate properly and where they go wrong. So what is number one reason why a project manager fails to estimate and fails to cope in all that uncertainty? Why it happens? What is one thing if someone is trying to fix that? What is that one thing a project manager can do to fix that thing? Given the scope of the project is an average scope, it's not a hugely complex 10-year software development.
The one thing that a project manager or an architect can do is look at some kind of historical data to be able to do it. It's all based on intuition. Right now, the way it happens is...
So you're saying the entire software estimation is primarily based on intuition?
It's intuition. It's also normally all the methods that even, methods like PERT and all of these you do, people sit down and they throw a number based on their own individual biases and intuitions. And whether you take an average case or worst case, methodologies like PERT, etc., it's just people sitting and just throwing out a number based on their experience. It could even get affected on that day when that estimation was done because how somebody was feeling about something.
Have you ever come across any software estimation कि आपने एक ही 2 different लोगों को भेज दी और widely different estimates?
Most of the times that happens.
So if there's no ground truth,
I would really like to have a study where estimations are done at a different time of the day, even if it's the same person. I'm pretty confident that that might change. You're more focused, sharp. Your brain chemistry different during the day. In the evening, it's completely different at night. So I'm pretty sure the study will say, you do it in the evening and it's probably different. This is all your intuition, expert knowledge coming in.
Why someone didn't fix it? It's been 40, 50 years now, especially in software. Product ke andar to chale, why it's not fixed?
So historically, we can improve it, using, like I said, machine learning models, like, you can have the data and all that. But what you don't have is all the other complexities or the other contextual things that might have happened to the course of that project. And that's where this machine learning, that's where the AI, the attention-based things come in, where these models can actually go through that data and learn what really happened during these projects and then make better predictions. So, for example, you would have planned versus actual data in a project, right? That, okay, this was planned, this was, and you can feed it to a machine learning model and it can, do some sort of trend analysis. But what you didn't have was a model which would actually go and ingest all the requirements and determine the complexity of that requirements as well. And which could go through the historical data of status reports, which were, just escalation reports, steering committee reports, what kind of issues were highlighted. That context was missing. We didn't have the technology to be able to do that. Large language models can do that now. When you combine the ability of large language models as well as traditional machine learning techniques, I think that's where the solution, at the intersection of which I think is the solution is.
I have this thing now. You said it's a huge problem. By now we figured it out. It's a huge problem. I mean, intuition-based estimation. Let's call it this. Not like abhi to mera AI pe to separate question. Like, do you think that if AI able to give us the estimates, we would trust on that?
It's an interesting one. So the way I think about this is, And especially, I was thinking about this from a problem and in most cases, that's what I see. You look around even projects that we do and some of the other companies that might work with. It's most of the cases a different team doing estimations and different doing execution. If AI is doing it, one of the key cultural impacts it has is there's no resentment amongst the team which is going to develop. So they won't blame anybody for these estimations. What they have is a central alignment truth, sort of truth, which has not been imposed on either party. That's a baseline they take and then they work around it. So they could improve it. They could see that, what are the shortcomings and so on and so forth around those estimates. I think that's a value. It's a very key value that I think we can all tend to ignore. I want to talk a little about what the ripples of this estimation is, by the way. I think it's very important to understand. I don't think we really think about these things. Wrong estimations mean that you're going to be either overcharging the customer or undercharging the customer. If you're trying to overcharge, you might lose the deal. If you're not, if the deal is not lost, later down the road, it will cause frustration for that company. If you're undercharging, then obviously that project is not going to be commercially, viable for your team. Because of this friction between teams doing the estimation and teams doing the execution, there's this sense of not owning the estimates, and then there's a blame, etc. as well. Repeat these cycles over and over again. There's a lot of baggage. People, go through these experiences. It has an emotional toll. It creates trust deficit between the stakeholders and the developers as well. It also promotes a culture where, all the time you're trying to explain the deviation between the plan, and the actual, and somehow that not being, the developer's fault. And you go through a bunch of experiences like that, and, you pretty much destroyed the culture, and, it's not a fun experience going through this over and over again, stemming from this one idea. So I just want to lay it out on the table. This as deep and pretty much affects the company, pretty much the life cycle of every step of the way through the project and so on and so forth. Now, again, wanting to solve it,
can AI
I think
solve this?
I think we have the tools, as explained, combining traditional machine learning statistical techniques with large language models. And it's a bit of a data problem as well, right?
So and my question is, like, for example, if I figured out this is going to take 5,000 man hours, let's say. AI, our model says that this sort of work is going to take 5,000 man hours. I'm going to trust that number. Okay, yes, because if we do, it means that whatever happens during the project life cycle, we would say, that's what it is. We can't go back and say कि AI ने निकाला तो ठीक नहीं था, because वो बहुत macro पे है या whatever. I'm going to trust because that's we'll build that model. We would have that data, but if we build that model, क्या उस model पे trust बनेगा? Developers का, stakeholders का, clients का.
Over a period of time, when all of this process improves, obviously ban jayega. But I would rather go from an approach where people have a consensus without resentment to take a number and work with it. Like I said, if somebody is doing estimations, there's a blame finger pointing at some point. But if you're leveraging on AI, and obviously now we have reasoning model, now you can look at chain of thought as well. All of this thing, you have certain confidence. And it's an ongoing improvement journey as well. If the other way to think about it is also, if we have any confidence in what this technology would be in the next couple of years, any rate of improvement that we can think of, then starting and embarking on this journey with what we've got and then building on top of it is the way to go. So maybe to start with, you've got a number from the AI model, and then you've done some subjective estimation as well, and then you're trying to look at both, and then maybe that's how you start. And as as more data comes in, as more, things come in, it keeps on getting improved, so on and so forth. So it's better to start.
On a different note, one is एक ऐसे मॉडल को प्रिपेयर करना बनाना जो AI के थ्रू हमें एस्टिमेशंस में हेल्प करे, दैट्स वन थिंग. बट वन ऑफ द चैलेंज दैट वी हैव इज कि जो आपकी सीनियर लॉट है, पीपल हु आर 10+ years of experience, जब उनसे एस्टिमेट्स मांगे जाएं, वो एस्टिमेट्स तो देते हैं, बट दे डू नॉट फैक्टर इन दिस मैसिव इनक्रेडिबल engineering velocity that comes with using AI tools, for example, Copilot, and they don't get it. I mean, one of the challenges, they don't get it. I mean, is it a good idea to convince them that this is a modern way of work? Because they say, no, that's it. And if they're not, if it's not being reflected in estimations, so, I mean, clearly you cannot even compete. You can't deliver that value to the customer.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty clear about this. And one of the reasons why, by the way, one of the keys.
And you're doing coding, you're using cursor and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know what value does that make? It's unbelievable. Do you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to know. You've been using cursor.
Yeah.
You've worked, मैं ख्याल 15 साल से आपने.
Right. I had not written a line of code in 15 years.
15 years. And now.
And then I just picked up cursor and I'm building it.
And you've done it.
Yeah.
In 3 hours.
Yeah. And I just built an AI agent is what I'm building. And it's just unbelievable, somebody who's not written a line of code in like 15 years and then I just start off and it just right away, the kind of progress that I made in 2-3 hours I was shocked. I had like goosebumps, what was going on, being so close to the technology. But I want to highlight a key point here. Now, this has become non-negotiable. To me, with what I've seen and experienced, this is non-negotiable. The reason why you need the technique also is, and I know for a fact that a lot of companies are struggling as we speak about this, because ignoring, the code generation capabilities of these, generative models means that you're not even, in software services, you're not competitive anymore because your estimation is going to be way too high than, what people are willing to pay. Now, if you don't have an estimation based on these techniques, the problem you face is you can't incorporate the value, the code generation can bring in. Why? Because when you try and get a good estimate, that is probably from a developer who has 10 years of experience or more, or so on and so forth. And that intuition and that bias is already there. But you don't have that data, that what percentage of improvement is the code generation tool is going to bring in. So nobody has intuition about it. So if you don't have a subjective way of measuring the data and, instead of expert judgment, having a more subjective way of doing it, a more mathematical way of doing it, then how are you going to know what to do? Because traditional method of intuition is outdated, not because of anything, just because of the fact that some tools have come about who can generate code anyway. So whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, you don't know. And I don't know how long is it going to take for people to start using these tools and develop that intuition. The intuition is probably going to take a long time. If you start collecting the data, it'll probably be a lot easier. Maybe in the 3 to 6 months, you'll probably have the data and, these models will know, okay, this is the efficiency you can bring about. So that's another, I think, existential question.
We're talking a lot about AI and software estimations, or engineering velocity milti hai, these new copilots and cursors and all that. Facebook is saying they are probably slashing mid-level engineers.
Yeah, that's a...
Salesforce keh raha hai ki they are not looking to onboard any new engineer because they have just found this so incredible engineering velocity. They're looking for hiring salespeople, taking no more engineers. जो graph US government ने labor statistics publish किया software jobs का, that was like starting from 2022 onwards, बिल्कुल decline है. Someone who's been in the industry from last 4 or 5 years doing job, what do you think? How should they think about this? All this what's happening? So, क्या उनको co-pilots use कर देना चाहिए? Because these companies are focusing on either elite status engineers, straw level Andre Karapati types, or entry level young engineers, and giving them those tools and saying there is no entry level engineer. How do you say that? How do you see कि वो mid level, वो 4-5 साल वाले जो लोग हैं, where they should focus on?
I think where the technology is right now, And obviously, you've seen the trajectory. I mean, what people are not really thinking about is, the reason why I say that, and very recently I had the chance to, for one of our senior positions with the customer, I had interviewed more than 20, 30 people around different organizations, so on and so forth, in leadership roles. And what people are really not thinking about is where the trajectory is. Just to put some things in perspective, Mark Zuckerberg said, okay, we're going to have by the end of 2025 a mid-level AI agent, which could code, a mid-level engineer, but it's going to be very compute heavy, right? So we're thinking, all right, it's compute heavy. Maybe it's not it's one of those quantum computing things where it's just not practical. In last 3 years, when it comes to efficiency and cost reductions, 1200x improvement since GPT-3 to GPT-4.0.1 has happened already. 1200x. So we talk about Moore's law, and it's gonna, every 9 months, the cost is gonna be reduced, and So this is unlike anything that has happened. 1200x. So we might be talking about this, but in a couple of years' time, if the rate of change is anywhere close to what it is, we don't even know in how much time the cost, compute heaviness is gonna, come down so dramatically, especially with the, reasoning models coming in, which are extremely good at coding, and as they improve, again, looking at the trajectory. So I think now these tools are superpower for developers. They need to develop deep familiarity, deep knowledge of using these tools to start with, so that they can improve their product. That's how you're going to compete, right? For now, that I could be way, way more productive if I'm leveraging on those tools. If somebody like me after 15 years can actually build a piece of software in a day, leveraging on something like Cursor AI, I'm pretty sure people who are experienced can do wonders already with using these tools and improving their productivity and so on and so forth. I really, really believe that. And then there's a larger discussion around building, essentially expertise around domain and, deep domain knowledge and so on and so forth. And that's there. I think right now,
I think deep familiarity with the tools and deep domain knowledge. If we have both of these things, probably gonna survive this. लेकिन अगर आपके पास, and let me tell you, 80 to 85% of software engineers, it looks very absurd, but 80 to 85% of software engineers don't have any familiarity with the tools. They've been doing, and look how odd it is. How a software engineer is not familiar, but that's what it is. होता क्या है, for example, if you are working on one stack, बस आप अपने 5, 8, 9 उसी में लगा दिए. Deep familiarity means your ability to look at how many different technology and tool sets is available and trying to use it. But that requires a new learning curve. I'm telling you, based on my experience and talking to so many people, 80% of the people don't have any familiarity with the tools. And people use their deep domain expertise sometimes to say that's the reason they don't want to have, they don't need to have that deep familiarity. They're so good in domains. They are here not for engineering, but for the domain knowledge and domain. And I think that ये बच जाना कभी इधर से उधर और कभी उधर से, that's not gonna work anymore. You need to have a domain knowledge, and you need to have, I mean, if you're a software architect for, let's say, for a logistics industry, yes, मेरी expectation यही है कि आपको logistics का भी पता हो domain, but it does not mean क्योंकि आप logistics के बड़े चीते हैं, तो now you're exempted कि आपको software architect. No, you need to know what exactly what does it mean. आपको पता होना चाहिए कि data intensive programming क्या होती है. आपको ये सारी चीजें पता होनी चाहिए.
No, I think so. It's a red flag for countries like us, etc. As well. At least having that sense of urgency. So basically, what you're talking about is there's not even a sense of urgency. I mean, nobody's saying that next week or next month, suddenly developers are outdated. But you got to look at where this is heading and at the pace. All I would say is, just try and look at where this is heading. And whatever rate of change right now you're seeing, even discounted it by whatever factor that you want to. And then try and see where this could be.